Have you ever wondered what happens when two neighbors, tied by history, war, and survival, must rely on each other, yet never fully trust one another? Today, we're going to explore the quiet but powerful story of two such nations, North Korea and China, and how their complicated friendship has shaped an entire region. During the Korean War, the bond between North Korea and China began to form in a dramatic and significant way. In 1950, North Korea, backed by the Soviet Union, invaded South Korea, aiming to unify the peninsula under its rule. However, the war quickly escalated when the United States and other United Nations forces intervened to support South Korea, pushing North Korean troops back towards the border with China. At that moment, China made a pivotal decision that would change the course of the conflict and define its relationship with North Korea for decades. China sent hundreds of thousands of troops, known as the Chinese People's Volunteer Army, to fight alongside North Korea. These troops crossed the Yalu River and engaged in fierce battles against US and UN forces, ultimately forcing them to retreat back below the 38th parallel. This intervention not only saved North Korea from collapse but also cemented a sense of brotherhood between the two nations. China's leader at the time, Mao Zedong, believed that helping North Korea was essential to defend China's own security and to prevent hostile forces from reaching its border. The sacrifices made by Chinese soldiers during the war created what both nations referred to as a bond of blood ties. This shared wartime experience became the foundation of their political alliance, with China portrayed as the protector of its smaller neighbor. Over the following decades, both governments used this history to reinforce their friendship. War memorials, ceremonies, and school teachings in both countries honored their joint struggle against common enemies. Even today, the memory of China's intervention in the Korean War remains a powerful symbol in both nations' political rhetoric, reminding people of the deep historical roots of their relationship and the lengths they went to defend each other. In times of great crisis, after the Korean War, the relationship between North Korea and China became deeply tied through shared political and ideological foundations. Both nations adopted authoritarian systems rooted in communism, though their approaches were not identical. China followed Mao Zedong's path of revolutionary socialism, marked by mass campaigns and class struggle, while North Korea, under Kim Il-sung, developed its own ideology called Jukki, which emphasized self-reliance and independence. Despite their differences, both countries saw themselves as part of a broader socialist bloc, standing against the influence of capitalist nations, especially the United States. This shared identity allowed them to maintain a close relationship for many years. China provided aid, technology, and resources to help North Korea rebuild after the war, and supported its economic development through favorable trade agreements and technical assistance. North Korea, in return, maintained loyalty to China on the international stage, aligning itself with China in political forums and often coordinating their diplomatic strategies. The two countries regularly exchanged high-level visits, and their communist parties maintained close contacts through formal channels. Propaganda in both nations often highlighted their shared socialist values and friendship, portraying their alliance as a natural bond between brotherly nations. However, the relationship also faced strains during certain periods, particularly during the Sino-Soviet split, when North Korea sometimes tried to balance its ties between China and the Soviet Union. Despite these occasional tensions, the ideological connection remained strong, because both countries viewed their systems as vital to resisting foreign pressures and maintaining their sovereignty. Even as China began to reform its economy and open up to the world in the late 20th century, it continued to regard North Korea as a fellow socialist state that needed protection and support. Their mutual political ideologies continue to influence their interactions, especially regarding regional security and diplomacy. China has been North Korea's most crucial economic partner for decades, serving as its main lifeline amid international isolation and sanctions. Due to North Korea's limited resources and self-imposed economic restrictions, it heavily relies on China for essential goods and services. China supplies a significant portion of North Korea's fuel, food, fertilizers, and machinery, helping to sustain its fragile economy. Trade between the two countries has been vital, with North Korea exporting minerals, seafood, textiles, and labor to China in exchange for much-needed goods such as oil, grain, and medical supplies. This trade has continued, despite various rounds of United Nations sanctions imposed on North Korea due to its nuclear weapons program. Many of these transactions occur through both official and unofficial channels, including border trade zones and informal barter exchanges. China has often been criticized by the international community for not fully enforcing sanctions, but Beijing justifies its actions by arguing that maintaining basic trade prevents economic collapse and social unrest in North Korea. China also plays a key role in infrastructure projects in North Korea, contributing to the construction of roads, railways, and industrial facilities that enhance bilateral connectivity. In return, North Korea provides China with access to its mineral resources, such as coal, iron ore, and rare earth elements, which are valuable for China's industries. Additionally, many North Korean workers are sent to China to work in factories, bringing foreign currency back to Pyongyang. The relationship is not purely based on friendship, but rather mutual benefits, with China seeking stability along its border and North Korea depending on Chinese goods for survival. This economic interdependence means that North Korea often turns to China for help during times of drought, famine, or financial distress, and China remains cautious in balancing its support with its broader foreign policy goals in the region. North Korea's nuclear weapons program has been one of the biggest sources of tension between Pyongyang and Beijing. While China remains North Korea's main ally, it has long been frustrated by its neighbor's repeated nuclear tests and missile launches. North Korea began developing its nuclear program in the late 20th century, and its first nuclear test in 2006 marked a turning point in its relationship with China. China strongly opposed the test, fearing that it would destabilize the region and provoke greater military involvement from the United States and its allies, particularly near China's own borders. Despite their shared history, China has repeatedly called for North Korea to abandon its nuclear ambitions and return to dialogue. China has supported United Nations Security Council sanctions on North Korea after each major nuclear test, including bans on coal, iron, and other exports. However, Beijing is cautious in how far it goes with these sanctions, fearing that too much pressure could cause North Korea's government to collapse. A collapse could lead to a flood of refugees into China, and possibly the presence of US forces near its borders, something China deeply wishes to avoid. China's leaders have urged North Korea to pursue a peaceful path, promoting denuclearization through negotiations rather than confrontation. At the same time, China has criticized US military activities near the Korean peninsula, arguing that American pressure worsens tensions. North Korea, however, often ignores China's warnings and continues its weapons development, knowing that China is unlikely to fully abandon it. This has created a complex dynamic where China tries to balance its frustration over North Korea's defiance with its need to maintain a stable and friendly neighbor. Although both nations publicly express unity, the nuclear issue remains a major point of discomfort between them, testing their alliance repeatedly over the years. The border between North Korea and China plays a central role in shaping their relationship, especially regarding security concerns. The two countries share a long, mountainous border that stretches over 1,400 kilometers. This border is not only a geographical divide, but also a critical security zone for both nations. China has always been concerned about the possibility of instability in North Korea, fearing that any sudden crisis, such as regime collapse or war, could send a wave of refugees into its northeastern provinces. These areas, including Jilin and Liaoning, already have close cultural and economic ties with North Korea, and large refugee flows could overwhelm local resources and create political instability within China itself. To prevent such outcomes, China has invested heavily in reinforcing its border security. It has built fences, increased military patrols, and stationed troops near key crossing points. Beyond the refugee issue, China also fears that the collapse of North Korea could lead to a reunified Korea, allied with the United States. This would place American military forces directly at China's doorstep, something Beijing has sought to avoid for decades. For this reason, China supports a stable and functioning North Korean government, even if it disagrees with its actions. From North Korea's perspective, the border is both a lifeline and a shield. It uses the border to conduct trade with China, which is vital for its economy, while also relying on China's desire for stability to ensure that it faces no serious external threats from its northern neighbor. Both countries regularly coordinate on border management, holding discussions to prevent smuggling, illegal crossings, and other activities that could cause diplomatic friction. The shared interest in preventing instability along the border has kept their security relationship steady. Even during times of political disagreement or rising international tensions surrounding North Korea's actions, the relationship between North Korea and China is a delicate mix of strategic friendship and mutual distrust. Both nations benefit from maintaining ties, but their interactions are often shaped by careful calculations rather than genuine trust. China views North Korea as a necessary buffer state that keeps U.S. military influence at a distance from its borders. For China, preserving a stable North Korea, even with its unpredictable behavior, is preferable to the risks of a sudden collapse that could trigger regional chaos or bring American troops closer. North Korea, on the other hand, sees China as its main source of economic survival. Despite frequent political strains, Pyongyang knows that China remains its most dependable partner in trade and diplomatic support. However, North Korea deeply values its independence and often resists being overly dependent on China's influence. North Korea's leadership has historically been wary of China interfering in its internal affairs, and it has carefully guarded its sovereignty, even as it accepts economic aid. The nuclear issue has further tested their relationship, as North Korea often proceeds with missile tests or weapons programs despite China's objections. These actions show that North Korea is determined to pursue its goals, regardless of Beijing's warnings. Despite these tensions, both countries continue to find common ground in opposing U.S. pressure and resisting foreign interference in East Asia. Their strategic interests overlap in maintaining a divided Korean peninsula, preventing war, and limiting American influence in the region. China occasionally uses its influence over North Korea as a diplomatic tool in international negotiations, showing its leverage while avoiding actions that could fully sever the relationship. Both sides understand that their partnership, while not without problems, offers mutual advantages. Their connection remains rooted in history, survival, and shared strategic concerns, making it unlikely to break despite their deep-seated mistrust. In the end, the story of North Korea and China is not simply about friendship or rivalry. It is a story shaped by history, war, and shared struggles, but also by careful choices and quiet fears. They stood together during the hardest of times, and their bond was forged in war and sealed through decades of political ties. Yet, beneath their connection lies a constant push and pull relationship where trust is limited, but necessity keeps them close. China supports North Korea to maintain stability and protect its own interests, while North Korea depends on China but refuses to fully submit. Together, they navigate a complicated path, balancing old loyalties with present-day challenges. Their story is one of neighbors bound by history, shaped by politics, and guided by the choices they continue to make in a changing world.